Are we turned on to? Okay. The recording and live stream has just started. Welcome to everyone here in person today and to everyone who is visiting our service from home. The UU Fellowship of Lake Norman is an open and inclusive congregation. Our members walk diverse paths to find meaning and purpose, but we're united by our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of all, and by the responsibility to express our faith through acts of justice and compassion. My name is Sandy McFeely, and I've been an active member of the congregation since 2013. Our speaker today is a special and short notice guest, Reverend Dr. Ed Boye. He is a retired, well, he used to be retired, Methodist minister and a retired clinical pastoral counselor. We know him as a great friend of Reverend Pat's and a frequent visitor and occasional speaker in this very space. And we are both delighted and grateful to welcome him here today. He will give us some words to open our service.
Pat gave me permission to change this in any way. I'm not changing it, but I'm sort of like, it's sort of like a tag team thing. What I'll be preaching is what he has written, and every now and then I'll throw something in from the sidelines. And I will let you know, because I got Pat here, and then down here I've got Ed, and I got Pat. Looks like a conversation. But anyway, Pat. Our opening words come from Autumn Weathers, who brought us a great message last week, Ed, and she did. She said many UUs do not believe in prayer, but she does, and she shared a beautiful prayer. What is prayer anyway? Do we pray to that painting on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel? Heck no. Most people who pray learn that somehow someone was listening when we were little children. It was like wishing upon a star, on which Walt Disney recommended. Most of us still pray, believe there are simply larger forces at work, and maybe even voices we might hear. Just like preparing to step off of a curve into the pathway of an oncoming 18-wheeler, and we hear, wait a minute. It may be as dear as a little child that says, with the little child's voice, try that again. It may be as dear as a little child's voice, our own voice that we heard as small children when we were told that Jesus could walk on water, Buddha could fly, Krishna could come down from heaven and talk to Arjuna. There were three little words spoken in our childhood voices. Wait a minute. And I would add to this that every time you think of someone in a kind way or wish them some goodwill, it is a prayer. The wait a minute is that we take time, we stop and focus our attention on someone in need. I believe we're sending energy and love and connecting with that larger something. Pat. Again, these very long opening words come from Autumn Weathers, our extraordinary director of spiritual education. Last week she said, the meaning of life is not contained within one act, or one day, or 1 year. As long as you are alive, the story of your life is being told, and the meaning is still open. As long as there is life in the world, story of the world is still being told. What is done, but nothing is settled. And if nothing is settled, then everything matters. Every choice, every act in the new year matters. Every word, every deed is making the meaning of your life and telling the story of the world. Everything matters in the year coming, and more importantly, everything matters today. And I would add, and we are in charge of making choices matter for all of life, people, dogs, plants, the earth, everything we encounter every moment.
Please join me. Please join me in saying our chalice lighting words. They are from Albert Schweitzer, and you will find them in your order of service. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. And now we will have a story about purpose for all ages.
I think there's been a mistake. I was asked to tell a story about purpose, but I misunderstood. I thought we were talking about porpoise. So embarrassing. So, okay, in case you guys don't know, a porpoise is actually a sea mammal. It's in the dolphin family. It's smaller and shyer than dolphins, so it's more difficult to find. But porpoises, nevertheless, are very important. So I guess I don't really have anything else prepared, so I'm going to tell a story about porpoises. So this is called Elmira's porpoise. So there once was a girl named Elmira, and all she wanted for her birthday was a porpoise of her very own. She wished and hoped and dreamed of a porpoise. She asked her parents and her grandparents. She told all of her friends at school that she was getting a porpoise for her birthday. But her birthday came and went, and she could not and did not get a porpoise. She was disappointed, and she wanted answers. So she asked her parents, and they said, "Oh, Amira, we couldn't get you a porpoise. That is something you need to seek out for yourself." Amira looked at her parents, kind of funny, and said, "You know I said porpoise, right?" Like the sea mammal that's smaller than a dolphin? And her parents looked at each other and said, "Oops, you can't have a wild animal for your birthday anyway." She asked her grandparents, and they said, "Oh, Amira, we can't get you a purpose. You'll have to figure it out what your purpose is when you're older." And sometimes even adults don't know where their purpose is. And at this point, Amira was getting a little annoyed. "I said porpoise. Porpoise, like the sea mammal, like a small dolphin." Her grandparents said, "Oh, sorry, we misheard you. But we couldn't have bought you a porpoise anyway. They belong in the wild, dear." Amira was fuming. Why had no one understood that all she wanted for her birthday was a porpoise? And now that she thought about it, why were the adults so unwilling to give her a purpose either? What was a purpose anyway? So Amira set out to find a purpose. Over the next several years, she asked a lot of adults that she knew and she trusted, and some of the adults said, "I don't know. It's really a hard thing to explain what a purpose is." But some adults gave her some good advice. They said, "Pay attention to the things you care about and how you can use those things to make a difference in the world. You may not have a clear idea about it yet, but your purpose will certainly change over time. But if you think about the things that you value and how you can use those things for good, you'll be on the right track. So Amira thought about the things that she valued and cared about, things like animals and the habitats they lived in. She thought about the things she liked to do, things like learning new things and teaching those things to younger children. She thought about her heroes, people who were living their lives in ways that she wanted to copy. And she thought about what was possible, the ways that she could change the world when she got older. And eventually, after some time and some work, Amira came up with her purpose. And the funny thing is that Amira's purpose didn't stray too far from porpoises. She decided that her purpose was to be a caring advocate for the earth and teach others about conservation and habitats for porpoises. And that's just what she did. So after all, I guess I did have a story about purpose. All right. I've got a couple of kids with me. If you guys want to head out, we have a couple of activities planned.
Please stay comfortably seated as Teresa welcomes us into this space and time of worship with her music.
Oh, no, not again. That guy who calls himself a small town Southern mystic wants to know again, what are we doing? Well, isn't it obvious? We're getting dogs off chains, feeding poor people at Feed North Carolina, encouraging voting and litter pickup, and meeting refugees and immigrants at the bus station, and occasionally hanging out together. What else does this pesky preacher guy want? And yes, he does remember Elvis's birthday. I'm not sure what that's about, but I call it a Pattism. When I was a little boy, I dreamed of refighting the Civil War, and this time the South would win. After all, General Lee was much prettier in his uniform than General Grant. And the World Encyclopedia said that 1/7 of the Confederate Army was from North Carolina, my home state. I did not know that 2 of my great-great-grandfathers had actually supported the cause of the boys in blue. I knew nothing about slavery. One night I woke up crying because those awful Yankees had beaten the South. And my mother put me on her lap and talked to me about slavery. After hearing about that, I had to cry some more. My love affair with the Confederate States of America ended then and there, and it beats the dickens out of me why other people in our beloved Southland have not had similar endings to their love affair. They obviously did not have my mother, or in my case, my father, who was a civil rights worker on the committee in Knoxville, Tennessee in the early 60s. I heard from some of those who were holding on to their Confederate money, hoping the South would rise again, by vile threats to my family through the telephone. Pat, my next dream was to organize all 12-year-olds in the world into an association that would usher in world peace, end world hunger, create a kind of utopia. No more war, no more poverty, plenty of health, human services from India to China to North Carolina and beyond. Again, no dice. I won't give you my whole story, although anybody who wants to hear it is welcome to ask, and I'm sure he will tell you. The worst part will be left out, of course. But now I drive between 90 minutes and 2 hours to be with you on Sunday afternoons, to build dog fences, feed the poor, and feed North Carolina, to do home visits, to do one delightful hospital visit with Sue Friday after being barred from hospitals for more than 2 years. I wonder what he did. I'm afraid to ask. To be with other people who feel like they need the preacher, the minister, whatever you prefer to call me, to wonder sometimes as I hear the hum of my tires on the highway, what are we doing? Before I tackle that question one more time, let me say what I am pretty sure we're not doing. We're not preparing people for the hereafter. In my now 20 years as a Unitarian Universalist, 14 of those as a minister in our faith, I have learned you Hughes have about as many views of the afterlife as there are numbers among us. The old joke goes that if 2 UUs get together in an argument, at least 3 opinions will be expressed. We don't really worry too much about the hereafter. Therefore, I never met a UU who is afraid to die. 1 or 2 have complained a little that the process is uncomfortable, but the actual dying feels pretty much like a foregone conclusion. On the other hand, I know believers in the terrible theology of heaven and hell who have died screaming bloody murder and clutching the bed sheets as they roll into that land where they are called the roll up yonder. One poor soul was terrified of dying because he had operated a machine gun during the Korean War and had mowed down Chinese soldiers like grass. He had heart attack after heart attack, but could not quite slip the bonds of his mortal coil. Finally, I asked him, "Are you afraid to die?" And he said, "Yes," and told me about those Chinese soldiers. Since I was already a Universalist and knew that there was no hell for him to worry about, I opened the Christian text and read to him about the forgiveness of sins and how that neither life nor death nor angels nor principalities could separate him from the love of God. He was able to die a few days later. That sermon several weeks ago that was preached about there not being any hell helped add a new chapter to the book I'm writing. And it came to me that the chapter title should be called Hell No. Continue with Pat. Just a footnote to that story. His sister-in-law called me and said, "We can't get the preacher we want to do Herbert's funeral. Will you do it?" And of course I did. As I've already said, we don't worry about the afterlife tomfoolery. One of my UU colleagues preached, "We are not worried about getting people to heaven. we're working to create heaven on earth. And I would say we certainly create enough hell here so we don't need to create a place to go and suffer. Pat says, that's right. That's the truth. That's the way it works. We build dog fences, meet the buses at the bus station to get refugees, greet refugees and other immigrants, feed the hungry people, and encourage voting, pick up litter, not because we fear judgment in the end, but rather because we already see that dogs off chains beat dogs on chains. Food beats hunger. Hospitality beats people coming through the bus station without enough to eat. Because roadside litter is just a blight, nothing good to be said for it. Unlike people who fear looking at the ultimate score sheet at the pearly gates, we do our math here and now. Subtract a dog chain, add a fence, add food to hungry bellies, subtract roadside litter, add voters, subtract the kind of politicians who get elected when voter turnout is too low, keep an eye on politicians who work to suppress voter turnout, subtract pollution, add environmental justice, subtract racism, add racial conversations to keep the issue in front of us, all as we grow and change toward racial harmony. On one hand, the math is impossible. This is one of the reasons I ask, what are we doing? The odds feel long and daunting. One colleague who worked with me for safety and encouragement among other victims of domestic violence in McDowell County, North Carolina, said these discouraging words. Once you have sheltered every woman who needs you in McDowell County, the women from Yancey and Mitchell counties will show up on your doorstep. Need will always outstrip resources. I don't believe that's true, but you have to remember my beliefs are totally unreasonable. I believe in Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and I absolutely do not believe in the National Football League. In the case of the NFL, it just feels like way too much time, money, and attention is spent on that otherwise that could feed the hungry, get more dogs off fences, and make for better welcome at the bus station for refugees and other immigrants. It's just math, folks. It takes one look at Erickson Stadium and compare it to the Friends Meeting House in Davidson, and you can see that the priorities of our culture are out of line. And I would add to that, not to mention the irreparable damage we're doing to our young men, as in the recent blow to the NFL and the nation with 24-year-old Buffalo Bills Damon Hamlin's cardiac arrest in front of the nation on the field. Pat, now I do hope those of you who love pro football will suddenly fall out of, he says, now, do I hope that those of you who love pro football will suddenly fall out of love? Of course not. You go on and do as you please, which is certainly not a message I would have preached when I was a United Methodist minister. Me either. But I think telling you to do what you please is a little like telling paint to dry. The paint is going to dry whether I tell it to or not. Do you need to do more or do it better? Probably. Will we? Who knows? If we did, what would we look like? The question for you to answer, of course, Of course, I would love to be involved in that process, but you folks will make it happen the way it's going to happen, regardless of my input. But I would love to be involved in the process. I just tried to imagine that conversation with our dear friend Jim Price. I imagine, and I could be wrong, that Jim Price would say, hey man, what's to talk about? We're already doing it. And of course, we're already doing it. But it never hurts to stop and check our progress. And I would add, I saw that some news source is encouraging everyone to do 365 days of kindness this year. It doesn't take much. Helping someone unload their groceries from the cart, or just taking the cart back to the rack. Simple acts of kindness have the butterfly effect that some of you may know about. It's a theory that if the butterfly stirs the air on the other side of the earth, it could create a tornado on this side. Sounds far out, but there's a connection of things happening, sort of like dominoes. So what kind of tornado of kindness do we want to place on the wind this year? Pat, I know things can change for the better. Although it required me to weep and moan and cry like a baby, I wouldn't take anything for sitting on my mama's lap and having her explain slavery to me. In moments like that, the hope is born that someday we will come when there isn't any more slavery. I know things can change for the better. If you want to see it in literal physical demonstration project, come to a dog fence build. They are extraordinary. The corner and gate posts are set on Thursday before Saturday. When 25 to 30 or more volunteers come rolling in, the dogs are usually kept inside the house or the trailer where the humans live. In a span of less than 2 hours, sometimes more like just over 1 hour, a remarkable change takes place. You get to see it happen and you get to put your hands on it and physically feel it changing. It's like magic. It's like a miracle. As the process starts, those corner and gate posts are all you see, but suddenly the wire is unwound, the steel side posts go in the ground, the wire is bent toward the interior of the fenced area, the ground wire is secured to the dirt so that dogs can't dig out, the gate is hung, fresh straw is spread, whatever doghouse gets a tarp for cover in sunlight and rain. Sometimes inhumane conditions can become livable and much more humane. And I haven't had the privilege of doing that yet, hope to at some point. I've heard some of you tell about the surprise and joyous exuberance when the dogs have all of a sudden been loosed from those chains. They run, they jump, they roll in the hay. That is the living God. Pat, it is Krishna explaining his duty to Arjuna, Buddha giving the eightfold path, Mohammed going to the mountain, Moses parting the sea, and Jesus rising from the grave. It is getting one more dog off a chain, but hold on. Before you rush out there and determine to make the world safe for democracy, there's one more lesson. Sometimes all we can do is to have serenity to accept things we cannot change. Reinhold Niebuhr told the United Auto Workers, you'll never love Henry Ford into paying you higher wages. He also wrote the prayer that is the staple of every meeting of AA and every other 12-step program. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. When we finally reach the end of the line, there may be yet one more dog on a chain in Lincoln County. There will certainly be someone who needs a meal or a chance at surplus groceries at Feed North Carolina. There will still be litter on the side of the road. Voters who miss their shot at unseating the nefarious practitioners of greed and warfare, poison of one kind or another in our land and water. But our ultimate failure is to do all does not deter us from doing what we can. Both Rabbi Herschel and Eleanor Roosevelt are credited with saying that just because we can't do it does not mean that we are relieved from the obligation to do what we can. The founder of Methodism, John Wesley, said, do all you can, in all ways you can, to all souls you can, in every place you can, at all times you can, with all zeal you can, as long as you ever can. That is a mighty unreasonable standard. Doubtless we will all fall short. But as we accept the things we cannot change, maybe we can go back and relax and maybe watch television broadcasts from the National Football League, or I would suggest PGA or NBA. Pat says, now let's talk about it.
It has become our custom in recent months to invite people in the congregation to talk back to the minister. If you have questions or comments, or you just didn't get what he was saying, I think he'd be glad to respond,
Yes.
I think. Or you could respond to Pat,
That's right.
and we'll let him know, you know,
My conduit,
yeah, he's channeling Pat now.
channeling.
I like the idea of 365 days of kindness,
Isn't that
because
wonderful?
that gave me something to do, because I work full-time, and I feel so tired after working full-time that I don't have time to like volunteer on the weekends, so I just didn't feel like I can give back on the weekends, but I like the idea that I can, even just kindness, you know, just being kind is giving back too.
We're of a country that thinks that we've got to do things in a big way. And it's amazing when I've done something simple and later somebody's come back to me and said it made a tremendous difference in their life. And I'm going, gosh, I just did something I would normally do, you know? So you don't know, you know? Just something simple. And believe me, you will know because it's out there all the time in front of us.
When I've been wrestling with groceries or, you know, giant collections of paper towels to get them from the cart back into my car at the Costco or wherever, someone sometimes appears and says, I'll help you with that. Very often it's another woman. And, you know, it's obviously a job for two, and they saw what was needed and jumped into it. And that really makes my day when that happens.
A little lady the other day, I picked up something that she had dropped. And she said, thank you, young man. Got something both ways there, you know.
Any other thoughts to share? Arvind?
Can you pray for somebody without that person knowing that you are praying? Is there a necessity of communication in that process?
Not as we know communication typically, words between you and I. But I truly believe that when you do pray or send energy to that person, they receive it. They may not know it, that somebody is doing that, but something changes in their life. I've read another of scientific studies actually on prayer and positive energy that has changed things in different parts of the world. And they've been able to prove. There was the Maharishi effect in India, you may have heard of, where the Maharishi said that, and I think I spoke to this one time, said that if you get 1/10 of the population of a city praying for peace, there will be less violence. They did that in Washington, D.C. and reduced violence during that time 17%. So, yeah, they get it. I think they got it.
Thank you. And now we'll have a musical reflection of the words. Thank you, Reverend Ed, for your words and for Pat's. And thank you, Teresa, for your music. That's one of my favorite songs. This fellowship is important to us all. The contributions we make today allow us to sustain and grow our congregation and to reach out to our community, both nearby and in the larger world. Your giving affirms our commitment to each other and to the community. With grateful hearts, we receive these gifts and Teresa's gift of music. May they encourage us to live lives of integrity, compassion, and peace. Please take a look at the announcements that are in your order of service with me. The next fence build for getting dogs off chains is in February. More information will come soon after the Perkinsons get back from taking a lovely cruise and a visit to California and lolling in the sun. We'll just wait. Many of you have already donated coats for the Latin American Coalition. Reverend Pat picked up some of them last week. If you have brought coats with you today, please see Lynn Henderson. She's a great presence, though vertically challenged like the rest of us. She has generously offered to deliver as many as fit in her car to the coalition this week. Last, Marjorie and I have some serving utensils, a serving dish, which we got back to its owner earlier, and a lovely little wood-handled paring knife with 3 brass rivets from last week's event. We have wrestled our consciences to the ground and want to return them to their rightful owners. Our closing song today is number 131, Love Will Guide Us. Please stand as you're able and willing.
Our closing words come from one of the patron saints of UUism, Kurt Vonnegut. Many people need to desperately to receive this message. I feel and think much as you do, care about many things you care about, although most people do not care about them. You are not alone. And Pat, we hope you get well. Thanks for allowing me to share your message. Get well. Bye.
We've come to the end of our service, so we will extinguish the chalice. Please join me in saying the words that are in your order of service. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. Go in peace.